Now we're going to work on the edge pieces, the pieces that go around the outside edge. So it's going to be a little bit more math. Now when we're done with this, it was about a 12 by 12, and that could vary slightly, but let's just go with 12, it makes the numbers easier. If we have a 12 by 12 board, you need to know how big is that going to be. So we need to know that very first, and I believe I did mine at 2.5 inches, just a little bit wider than the squares. It could be 3, it could be 2 1/4, whatever, it's fine. So at 2.5 inches sticking out, each one is 2.5, 2.5. So the math is pretty simple. I have a 12-inch piece here, and I have to add 2.5 inches to both ends. So 12 plus 2.5 twice, that's going to be 17 inches from there to there. But again, always add on at least an inch, especially with miters. I'm going to add on an inch, plus 1 inch. Now, we're also going to put in that inlay, which is another 1/8 of an inch piece. So this measurement may go to 2 3/4, and that's fine. If you're trying to keep it at 2.5, that's okay. We'll just have to cut some off and then glue some back on, or I may make this a little bit wider. It just depends. As we get going in the process itself, I'll explain how this is done. But because I'm adding a little bit more and this may get a little wider, I'm just going to throw on an extra inch. So add 2 inches instead of just 1. And so I know I'm safe. It's a little bit more cut off, but not a lot more work. So let's go out now and start cutting those border pieces. We're going to cut some cherry. These I found in the back. Now that obviously was a bad piece, so I'm going to chop that right off and get my 19 out of this. Don't really want the knot. I would recommend trying to steer clear of big knots. This one's not bad. You can see the other side, it does get a little worse. And then I found another piece that would do the other two. So set this to, in my case, 19, and we'll cut this off. Now we're going to cut these to 2.5. For the very next step, I finished cutting these, but what I was going to do that inlay, that light border around it, that thin part, is we're going to cut an 1/8 of an inch strip of the maple and glue it onto the edge, and then glue an 1/8 inch strip of the cedar onto that. So it'll just make this a little bit wider. Now I can always cut this down to the 2.5 later if I want. And that's what I meant when I was explaining you can still play with your width after. So what we need to do to cut that 1/8 inch strip, I can't set this to an 1/8 of an inch, not with the guard on. So to take that off, first in the front, turn off the machine. That's that flipper switch, turn it down, the light will go out. Lift this up, and right in front, you'll just lift this out. It's called a throat plate. Just pull it right out. Now, I know it's hard to see on the camera, but on the right side, there is a door that flaps on a hinge from here out. And you just kind of push that out of the way. So that's now out of the way. Exactly where my hand was, I'm going to lift. And you can see this little handle right here, and that's how this comes out. Set that aside. Put the handle back down, out of the way, and then put the door back in. That door is what gets the sawdust down into the dust collector. Then to put this back on, I can't just lay it on. It's a big ledge here. So you have to line up the screws. There's 2 screws there and 2 there. The heads of these need to go under the heads of these. This is what allows me to adjust up and down to get it perfect. So you have to slide it in, lay that down, and you're good. Now, we take our board, and we usually have this higher than that, but I want to lower it down till the board is at the bottom of the gullet. That's the dip between the teeth. Now the downside of having it that low is the board will tend to want to ride up on the blade. And if you ever are cutting and you see the board kind of go up, that's the reason typically. You just got to hold it down. So it's not necessarily dangerous, but it may come up a little bit, and you just push it down and on you go. Now we can move this to an 1/8 of an inch. Right there. And we have our push stick. And when you cut this way, you're going to cut into the push stick. That's fine. That's why I built this way. I've got a lot of room to cut in more. So that's okay. But keep your push stick as tight to the fence as you can as you push through. Turn the saw back on. It should take a moment for it to think about, it's resetting. Once the red light stops flashing, you're good to go. As you cut, push against it and hold it down, but do not push here where the blade is. For obvious reasons, the guard's now off. I don't want to get anywhere near it. So push straight in. Put this there, keep it tight, and I'm not pushing in at all. We're trying to get through this without any burns, and that's where I stopped for a moment. So get that push stick handy. There we go. When we glue these together, this is how I'm going to do it. Now I know these look a lot alike. These strips almost look like they're the same color, but once aging, this will darken, the maple will not as much. You'll be able to see it better. But anyway, so I have cherry, the maple, then the thin strip of cherry, and the opposite of that here, and then I did it again here. Now, guys, when I glue this together, I'm not going to put glue between these. I don't want a big block. I want 4 smaller ones. So to glue these together, we'll just do it one at a time. Put a nice big bit of glue there, and then we put the maple, and then another one here, and then the cherry. And that one's done. And we repeat that 3 times. Once you got your last one on, get them all put together as flat as you can, though we haven't planed these at all, so you have a lot of thickness to work with here. Snug up one side. Yeah, and I have to loosen and try to push things down here and there. If they slide up, good. Yeah, I need to fix that one. There we go. And again, I would overdo it with clamps. Now that doesn't mean make them extra tight, it just means I want a few more of them. So I'm snugging these up, just kind of one-handed, so they're not super tight. But I see glue squeeze out, and that's what I want to see. Now after these are dry, then we'll scrape and plane them.